What's the first thing that comes to mind when you think of the 1996 Chicago Bulls? Well, probably the fact that they're the greatest team of all time. The Bulls won 72 games en route to the championship, ranked number 1 in offense and number 1 in defense in the league. At a glance, you'd assume that this was the most dominant version of the Bulls we've ever seen, and the best that Michael Jordan has ever played at. Over the decades, people have worshipped this team. Nobody has ever said a single bad thing about them because they're considered the pinnacle of NBA basketball. However, out of all 6 of Jordan's finals appearances, did you know that his performance in the 1996 finals was actually by far his worst finals ever? You can argue that this was his worst playoff series ever. But because the Bulls won the title, it's been glossed over how Jordan had the most miserable games of his career. In The Last Dance, the 96 finals was talked about briefly, but Jordan's struggles were not mentioned, and he even dismissed the 2 guys who gave him such a hard time, Gary Payton and Nate McMillan. Anyway, how's it going, folks? My name's Andy, and today let's take a detailed look at Michael Jordan's 1996 finals and the adjustments the Seattle Supersonics made that nearly throttled the Bulls. So to start things off, whenever a team is up 3-0 in a series, it's basically a done deal, right? To this day, no team has ever come back from that deficit. So when the Seattle Supersonics found themselves in this insurmountable hole, there was little hope. Faith in this team dropped to an all-time low. While the 96 season was headlined by the Bulls, the Sonics low-key won 64 games, a franchise record that still stands today. They were the most dominant team of the West and sported the second-best defense in the NBA, with the Defensive Player of the Year in Gary Payton. They were considered to have the strongest defensive backcourt in the entire league and matched up quite well against the Bulls at every position. The thing is, for the first 3 games of the series, the Sonics only sporadically let Payton guard Jordan. The logic behind George Karl's decision was that he didn't want Payton to be worn out on offense, so he wouldn't let him guard Jordan the entire time. Plus, Payton had some lingering pain in his calves, so he wasn't 100%. It made sense at the time. As a result, for the first 3 games, Jordan was mostly guarded by Hershey Hawkins and Detlef Schrempf, a disaster for the Sonics. The Bulls' average margin of victory was 14 points per game in the first 3 games, and nobody thought the Sonics had any chance at this point. And that's when everything changed. There's a quote in the NBA that's been around for decades. I've heard it since I was a kid, and I don't know the exact phrasing of it, but it went something like this. Defense is like art, always underappreciated, and you'll never understand it if you don't know what you're looking at. At the start of Game 4, when Gary Payton decided to take over as the primary defender on MJ, you could immediately tell he severely disrupted him. But how was he doing this? Jordan is bigger, taller, stronger, and the best player on the planet. So despite Payton being the Defensive Player of the Year, it was shocking how much Jordan struggled against him. In George Karl's book, Furious George, he went into detail about this. He talked about how Payton was a huge advocate of studying film. He'd be in the film room all the time, and he knew every single one of Jordan's moves, every single movement and counter, every single habit. Pippen or Harper throws it to Jordan on the wing, he catches and immediately tucks it, both hands on the ball. Head up, elbows out. Not unusual, this is the triple threat position you learn in junior high. You can shoot, pass, or dribble from this semi-crouch. Then, Michael wipes the ball, swinging it low and back and forth in response to the defender's digs at it. Then, almost every time, Michael jab steps with his left foot. This little fake was the golfer's waggle, the thing he had to do before he could shoot or attack the rim. At every single point of Jordan's moves, Payton knew what to do. When he put the ball low, Payton tried to swipe at it. When Jordan tried to use his shoulder to create space, Payton gets up even further into him to not give him that space. When his teammates tried to get Jordan the ball in the post, Payton would front him, and due to his deceptive strength, Jordan had trouble moving him. In the following 3 games, from games 4 to 6, these were the numbers Jordan put up. In 2 of those games, he shot horrendously. That final game 6, 5 for 19 from the field. For a Finals MVP, it was one of the worst shooting performances ever for a series-clinching game. Even in Game 5 when he shot well, he only had 1 assist, due to the Sonics adjusting their game plan to shut everyone else around him. Jordan finished the series averaging 27 a game on just 41.5% from the field. Both are the lowest he's ever put up in any of his 6 finals. The Chicago Bulls ultimately won the series in Game 6, but nobody has ever seen MJ look so human. One thing to mention is that it wasn't just Jordan who struggled in the series. From Games 4 to 6, Scottie Pippen was even worse. The Sonics' defensive game plan extended far beyond just putting Payton on Jordan. In that finals, they popularized what we call nowadays as strategic doubling. Back in the day, if you couldn't guard your man one-on-one, then you call for your teammate to help you out. The Sonics, though, were very methodical in how and where they double-teamed MJ. They would very quickly send doubles when Jordan is at his worst possible spots, areas that could cut him off and force him into a bad position. The Sonics' defense moved like a string. They were such a dynamic and versatile defensive team that used every trick in the playbook to gain an advantage. The most important part was their physicality. As Payton described, quote, "A lot of people back down to Mike. I didn't. I made it a point. I said, just tire him out. I just kept hitting him and banging him and hitting him and banging him, and it took a toll on Mike." Besides Payton, there was another guy who did not get his due, Nate McMillan, a former all-defensive player. At this stage of his career, though, he was on the way out. He was getting older and wasn't the same player he used to be and retired a couple years later. McMillan also struggled with injuries all season long, even missing 2 of the 6 finals games with a back injury. And he only got meaningful minutes in 2 of the 4 games he appeared in. But in those 2 games, Games 4 and 5, the Sonics won both of them. Was it a coincidence? Well, I don't think so. In those 2 games, whenever McMillan was on the court, the Sonics had an absurd offensive and defensive rating. In Game 4, in the 14 minutes McMillan played, the Sonics had an offensive rating of 170 and a defensive rating of 100. It was the best offense the Sonics had for the entire series. Then in Game 5, in the 21 minutes he played, the Sonics had a 132 offensive rating and an 84 defensive rating. That was the best net differential of anyone in that game, on either team. While Payton was still the primary defender on Jordan, McMillan played a crucial role in slowing him down, and when Payton needed a break, McMillan took over. Like I mentioned earlier, the Sonics had the best defensive backcourt probably in NBA history. But it wasn't just defense. McMillan's sheer presence on the offensive end allowed Payton to flourish and play off the ball more. They had such great chemistry. Here are some more numbers. In the first 3 games of the finals, Payton had a hard time scoring. He averaged just 15 points a game on 40% shooting. In the last 3 games, however, with McMillan getting more meaningful minutes, Payton averaged 21 a game on 49% shooting. Over the years, you might have heard McMillan mention his injuries in the '96 finals. Whenever it comes up, he vehemently claims that the Sonics would have won the title if he didn't have an injured back. Of course, he got clowned for this. For those who never watched him, they look at his stats and see he averaged like 5 points. So how can he be the difference maker? Well, his impact goes well beyond the box score, so you can be the judge. On the other end of the spectrum, despite both Jordan and Pippen having the worst finals of their careers, it was the rest of the Bulls who picked up the slack. Rodman was a dynamo on the offensive glass. Kukoc and Longley played very well too. This is the only finals of Jordan's career where you can legitimately say his teammates picked up the slack and helped him when he needed it the most. At the end of the day, this run to the finals from the Sonics will long be forgotten. Heck, it probably already has been forgotten, pretty much like every other Sonics team from the 90s. Whereas for MJ and the Bulls, it solidified his legacy and this season as the greatest season and greatest team of all time. The more intricate details, however, are important to remember. It was the most difficult finals opponent MJ has ever faced. Thank you all so much for watching. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section. I hope y'all enjoyed the video, and of course, as always, I'll see you next time. Peace.